Coup leaders and colonial ghost. Africa struggles with true liberation with military coups toppling democracies across the region. Fighting poverty one pad at a time. A Kenyan Gen Z's mission to fight period poverty. With climate change driving extreme weather events, solutions are needed to tackle hunger and provide hope for a sustainable future. As Europe grapples with skilled labor shortage and aging population, could Africa's young, talented population create a mutually beneficial relationship? Good evening from K Central Newsroom. This is The Dive with me, Asli Galgalo. It's a pleasure to have you with us, whether you're joining us from Kenya or anywhere across the globe. This is the second episode of our program on The Dive. Stay with us. You can join the conversation on social media handles at Asli Galgalo on Facebook, Instagram, and on X with the hashtag DiveNow. Good evening and welcome back to The Dive. Tonight we turn our attention to the wave of instability sweeping across West and Central Africa. Between 2020 and 2023, a series of military coups has dramatically reshaped the political landscape. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, and even Sudan have witnessed the democracies give way to military rule. So what connects these events? Our correspondent Shalom Buyanzi explains.
West Africa has been rocked by a series of military coups in recent years, starting with Mali in 2020 and spreading like wildfire to Chad, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
Transition.
Each coup followed a similar script, generals stepping forward to promise freedom from foreign exploitation and the start of a new chapter for their nations. Take Mali's Assimi Goïta, who ousted the government in 2020. His stated mission? To end French exploitation and reclaim sovereignty. By 2023, Niger had followed with soldiers accusing the democratically elected government of being a puppet of Western powers. Burkina Faso even went so far as to stage 2 coups in a single year, each promising to chart a new path. But the question remains, is this liberation or simply a new form of dependency?
We don't need France, we don't need CDAO, we don't need anything. We like Russia, we like our country.
The price of rice has increased, but also that of cooking oil, an increase of $4 in just 1 week. This causes us problems because if I prepare the rice, I can't sell it. No profit, only losses.
To understand the roots of this instability, historians point to colonialism's long shadow. When European powers craved up Africa, they concentrated political and economic power in the hands of a few. Post-independence, this centralization made many nations vulnerable to power grabs.
Decolonization is still taking place. It's not a one-step process, and I may not be able to identify, particular points where countries decolonize themselves. Because education institutions remain the same, businesses remain the same, many things remain the same. So decolonization becomes an idea perhaps in academia more than the reality.
So, will Africa finally break free from external control, or will the current wave of military coups only deepen instability and dependency? As the world watches, the answers to these questions will determine the region's future. Shalom Vuyanzi, reporting for The Dive.
Joining me now live from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania is Mr. Godwin Gonde. Godwin Gonde specializes in teaching international law, conflict resolution, leadership ethics, conflict management, democracy and democratization, and security studies, among other things. Godwin, many experts trace the root of Africa's political instability back to colonial era. Can you explain how colonialism set the stage for the wave of coups we're seeing today? One of the key promises made by these coup leaders is to rebuild struggling economies, given the economic challenges and external debt burdens that they face. Is this goal realistic? So, military rules are actually raising concerns about the future of democracies in Africa. Is military rule the solution to issues affecting these countries, or is it just pushing these countries into further chaos? Thank you very much for joining us on the dive, Godwin. You are watching The Dive on KE Central with me, Asli Galgalo. Remember to join the conversation on our social media handles at Asli Galgalo on Facebook, Instagram, and on X with the hashtag DiveNow. And on to our next story. Poverty remains a serious challenge threatening the lives and dignity of millions across the world. From the struggles to meet basic needs to issues like period poverty, the impact is particularly severe for women and girls. Tonight, we look at how one young woman in Kenya is taking bold steps to fight that silent crisis.
Every month, millions of Kenyan girls face the harsh realities of period poverty, missing school, facing stigma, and struggling with access to basic menstrual products. Joy, a 23-year-old social worker, decided to change this narrative. She founded an initiative dedicated to raising awareness about menstrual health, training schoolgirls on period dignity, and creating pad banks in boarding schools.
Kenya in general, we have actually call it a pandemic of teenage pregnancy. So when we are looking into that, we realize that girls actually sleep with men, or rather compromise their safety just to afford menstrual products. So as a way to curb the cases of teenage pregnancies is to make sure that our girls have access to menstrual products in school so that they can stay in school and they don't compromise their safety.
At workshops organized by Zahara Initiative, girls learn about their menstrual cycles, proper hygiene practices, and the importance of breaking the stigma surrounding menstruation. Teachers and community leaders are also engaged to create a supportive environment for the girls. One of Joy's most impactful innovations is the creation of pad banks in schools. These are stocked supplies that ensure girls never have to miss class during their periods.
So this year we came up with our signature project, the pad bank project, where we improvise sort of a box that we install in school. Then our girls are able to access sanitary towels every month. So every school term, the pad bank is actually refilled with the pads. So our girls have pads every day in school. So in those schools, we've actually installed in 2 schools. So in those schools, our girls don't miss school because of sanitary towels, because the pads are always there available for them any day, anytime.
The Kenyan government has made strides in addressing period poverty. Policies such as the 2017 initiative to provide free sanitary pads to schoolgirls aim to curb absenteeism and promote menstrual hygiene. However, challenges persist. A lack of consistent funding and logistical hurdles often leave girls without the promised support. Reporting for The Dive, I am Summer.
That's a remarkable story of how grassroots initiatives are making tangible impact in the fight against period poverty in Kenya. And on to our next story. For the longest time, Africa has relied on debts to grow its economy. In 2022, public debt in Africa reached $1.8 trillion. Debt has become unsustainable as global financial pressures have weakened local currencies and increased the cost of servicing that debt. Recently, Ethiopia floated its currency, resulting to the birr values dropping by 30% against the dollar. Joining me now is Vincent Kimosop, a governance and policy practitioner. Thank you so much for honoring our invite, Vincent.
Honored to participate in this conversation.
Many African countries now spend a significant portion of their budget on debt servicing. What are the long-term consequences of this for critical areas like education, health, and even infrastructure?
UNFPA, the UN Agency for Population, they actually they published a report looking at the Asian tigers, how they performed, leveraged on what you call the demographic dividend. When you have a high number of young people who, if harnessed, well-trained, and economies open up, then these young people are able to find opportunities and contribute significantly to countries' growth. Then they harvested what we call demographic dividend. That is where we are at in many African countries. The median age is around 18 or 19. So if you then therefore are spending more of your money on debt servicing, then what happens? You will not provide the conducive environment. You will not provide social services, education, health, security adequately enough to create the environment that these young talents can be tapped. Then when they get to the age of labor and productivity, then they are able to significantly contribute towards shaping and bettering the economy. So that is also is a worrying issue for policymakers, even followers of programs in Africa, as to why it is good to have an Africa that is not spending a lot of its money towards debt servicing. Mm-hmm. But then there is a balance, so that then you more is enough or adequate resources are directed towards health, education, security, and then also growing the economy in a way that you are growing Africa's economies and leveraging on its youthfulness to produce and to produce the kind of populace that will emulate what happened in the Asian tigers.
We've seen, like in cases like Ethiopia, where floating the birr led to a 30% devaluation against the dollar. How does this currency depreciation impact a country's ability to service its external debt?
For the Ethiopia, you have to appreciate that for a long time, they had their currency, they had control regimes when it comes to their currency. So, but increasingly, as they needed to address their debt obligations, part of them was the call for financial sector reforms, reforms that included having a floating forex currency or exchange regime. So when you have to appreciate that when you have a control regime, the true value of your currency is not determined by market forces. So of course, if you're once you have a free floating, it's the markets that will give us the true value of your currency. So that shift, of course, had implications because the currency has to adjust to the market forces. And if you are doing your repayment of your debt, particularly borrowed in foreign currencies, if you borrowed during the period when the currency was controlled and you had a value X, let's say 100, and when you went and you have to have a free floating and the currency depreciates or appreciates, that will then directly affect because you will need to repay the same meet the same debt obligations. But if your currency has depreciated, for example, against the dollar, it means you will be spending more. You will be losing more as you meet your obligations. So, and of course, as a result of that, more amounts of money that will be going towards servicing of debt, meaning less of your money is available to provide services, and even more importantly, to address poverty, which is the subject of this conversation.
And what strategies should African nations adopt to build economic resilience in the face of global financial pressures and rising debt levels?
I think one is fiscal consolidation. It is good to just ask, how can we have a country that living within our means? The other thing is also addressing the issues of wastages, where really the much needed resources are going to areas that are not really important. So if you look at even the things that are being procured, where governments are spending their monies. So I think the issue of prioritization. And then number 3 is governance generally. So in other words, addressing corruption, theft, pilferage, and just securing and building and just fostering good governance. Hire people on merit, get the right people to be in the right positions and places. And then the other thing that will also be critical is just proper stewardship of economies.
Thank you very much, Kimosop. It was an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, we'll look at the African youth exodus to Europe and how this can bring a win-win situation for both continents. Stay tuned.
Hey, grab me one too.
Welcome back. This is the Dive on K Central with me, Asli Gilgalu. Food insecurity is one of the gravest challenges the world faces today as we brace for La Nina, which is expected to hit between September 2024 and March 2025. Experts warn that weather extremes could severely impact food security globally. According to FAO, more than 282 million people already face acute food insecurity and urgently need assistance. The consequences of La Nina, including drought and flooding, could push millions more to the brink of starvation. Our reporter Philippe has more on this.
Triggered by abnormal cooling of ocean temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific, La Nina disrupts weather patterns globally. Its impact is especially devastating in regions already battling climate shocks, such as sub-Saharan Africa. For farmers in Africa, erratic rainfall and prolonged droughts could mean failed harvests, water shortages, and a bleak future for millions dependent on agriculture. Meanwhile, relief organizations are sounding the alarm, urging urgent global action to mitigate its effects. With traditional farming methods failing under the pressures of climate change, a company in Kenya is using agrivoltaic farming, a technology that uses the same plot of land to produce crops and generates solar power.
In my farming area, initially I had very many challenges, especially when I didn't have water, that's constant water. I dug a borehole way back 2007, but I've been getting water manually, that's using a jerrycan and a rope, just to pull manually. And that was very tedious. But after acquiring sun culture pump or system equipment, now I find that life is changing.
Sun Culture's innovation offers a glimmer of hope as the world grapples with a growing food crisis. But how scalable is this technology, and can it make a real dent in addressing Africa's food security challenges? Experts think it is a major stride.
We should embrace the technology and see it as a part solution of the challenges that we are facing. What can it offer more than what are the concerns?
For The Dive, I am Felive.
Across the globe, a new wave of activism is being led by young people who are demanding change. In Kenya, the rise of Gen Z-led movement shook the foundation of political landscape, resulting in many changes. Our reporter Villa dives deep into this bold, innovative tactic of these young activists and explore their growing influence in Kenya and beyond.
From demanding justice to challenging government policies, Kenya's youth are at the forefront of political movements. The Gen Z generation, born into a digital world, is using social media, music, and art as tools of activism. Earlier this year, Gen Z activists organized a nationwide protest against the new taxation laws that they argued disproportionately affected the youth and the unemployed.
This is our city, na tuwezi kuishi hapa, na tutakubali. Hatuwezi kubali this one in Nairobi.
They told us the government is for hustlers, but today we are suffering.
Using platforms like TikTok and Twitter, they mobilized thousands, capturing national and international attention.
The networks, the social networks, is ballooning up very fast. It's taking the center stage. So you cannot force people. So therefore, the future of the Gen Zs is brighter, is greater, and therefore they are going to take much control. How governance and resource allocation is going to be dictated, they will dictate. Take it from me.
Kenya's Gen Z activists are proving that they are not afraid to challenge the status quo. Their movements highlight the potential for youth-driven solutions to political challenges, offering a glimpse into the future of governance in Kenya and beyond. For The Dive, I am Villa Mbenge.
Africa is home to the youngest population in the world. This vibrant, motivated generation holds immense potential to drive Africa's growth. However, recent reports show that half of the African youth are considering immigrating abroad, driven by unemployment, lack of opportunities, and political instability. But the immigration story is not just one of ambition, but also one of risk and resilience. Tonight, Steve Awino brings you a two-sided tale of immigration, one of despair and another of determination.
Migration has always been a part of Africa's history, but the scale of youth migration today is unprecedented. While many seek legal pathways, the dangers of irregular migration continue to claim lives. In 2023 alone, the International Organization for Migration reported that over 2,000 migrants died trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea. Among them were young Africans chasing dreams they couldn't fulfill at home. This young man left Ethiopia to get to the Middle East for work, but is now stuck in Djibouti.
I left home with 7 people, but only 2 of us survived the journey. The rest died. 3 died on the way to Djibouti. 2 went to Eritrea and died there. It's just me and 1 person now.
But not all stories are marked by tragedy. Let me introduce you to Juma, a young Kenyan software developer with a different path. Juma recently secured a tech job in Germany through a legal work visa program. Despite earning a degree in computer science from one of Kenya's top universities, he struggled for 2 years to find a job locally.
After completing my bachelor's degree in computer science, I joined other Kenyans in tech industry to look for a job. So leveraging sites like LinkedIn, Upwork. The road was not as easy as it seemed at the beginning. So it took almost 2 years of small projects, upskilling of different parts of the software development. I was able to land my first major job with a German company.
Juma's story highlights the need for systemic change to create opportunities for youth at home and the potential benefits of migration when done legally and safely. While his showcases the possibility of legal migration, they also underscore the importance of addressing the root causes driving Africa's youth abroad. From unemployment to political instabilities, the solutions require collaboration between African nations and their global partners. For The Dive, I'm Steve Awino.
Thank you very much, Steve. As we've seen, the migration of Africa's youth is a complex issue, one that carries risk, challenges, and opportunities. Joining me in studio is David Wamwai Nation, a transport economist working on the Horn of Africa Road Project. Thank you very much for joining us in studio, David.
Yeah, thank you very much.
David, we're seeing a growing migration of African youth to Europe, and some are even moving to the Middle East. So is this migration purely an economic issue, or does politics and social factors play a role?
Thank you for that question. First and foremost, it's also good to look at the demographics of both Africa and Europe, and mainly the West. When you look at the demographics, you'll notice that Africa has a very youthful population. There is a youth bulge, whereas the West, they are more or less aging. And this is creating a gap in terms of skills gap, and even for the skilled workers and non-skilled workers. So definitely at some point in time it will require this gap to be filled, and the only sources of this gap being filled are mainly in the southern countries, that is Africa and Asia, but it seems Africa has been targeted. Another factor which could be driving the migration of the youth to the West is also the lack of opportunities back at home. If you look at most African countries, we've turned them, most of them have turned from being production or producing countries to consuming countries.
David, most people say Africa is experiencing brain drain due to this migration. What is the long-term impact or long-term implication of this on Africa's development?
It's very interesting when we talk about brain drain in Africa, because if you look at most of the opportunities which are being advertised or even being sought for by the West, you realize they are not the skilled opportunities. You realize, for example, you'll not hear of them looking for doctors, you'll not hear them looking for lawyers, you'll not hear them looking for those skilled economists or the skilled workers, engineers. Mainly you'll hear them looking for the non-skilled workers, mainly cooks, domestic workers, guards, and sort of the like. So in terms of brain drain, in terms of the youth who Africa are training, yes, in some sort of way there is a brain drain, because once they are trained and there's no opportunities, they tend to move with the other non-skilled workers just to secure an opportunity. But it's not that significant compared to when in the past, like 20 or 30 years ago, when majority of the youths who were moving out of the country were mainly the young, skilled professors, lawyers, doctors, and this led to a significant brain drain because the country lost a huge generation of experts, and it was really costly to replace them.
There's been talk about circular migration, where skilled labor, or rather skilled workers, move abroad temporarily and then return back to Africa with new expertise. Is this realistic or a scalable solution for Africa and even for Europe?
Correct. For example, I'll give an example. I myself am a consultant. I'm a transport economist. Majority of my work is not in Kenya. I've worked in Kenya, yes. I have projects in Kenya, but majority of my work is outside Kenya. Worked in Tanzania, worked in Laos, I worked in Zimbabwe. I go there, gather experience, and come back home and be able to implement those experiences. And for the West mainly, if you see them coming to Africa, this is the first point of training, because you get first opportunity to deal with the development issues. And when they go back to their countries, they now know the cost of underdevelopment and the cost of not developing. So it's a win-win, even for those Africans who go out in terms of skilled labor to gain experiences in the West. They now understand, for example, if it's a matter of providing efficient healthcare, what it requires, what is needed, efficient governance, what is required, what is needed, so that when they come home, they can be able to implement those policies.
Thank you so much for joining us in studio, David.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode. Thank you very much for joining us as we explore these pressing global issues, from the escalating coups in West Africa to food insecurity, youth activism, and poverty. From KE Central, this is The Dive. I am Asli Gilgalo. Good night.